First off, this is our inaugural Fireside Chat. We are pleased, excited, thrilled to have Lauren Schwartz, who is part of our in-house advisory committee. And Lauren, I have known for, maybe 4 or 5 years now. I actually know one of your mentors, and she speaks very, very highly of you. But I actually knew you when you were at Groupon, and you've always been a rock star in my mind, but also someone who has really been an advocate for women, an advocate for speaking up for yourself and asking for what you want. And it's really exciting to see what has happened in your career. And actually, I've done a little research from, a legal assistant now to general counsel with Cleverbridge. And so there's a lot to cover. And so I want to just start out by saying, do you want to tell us a little bit about, kind of walk us through a little bit of your career starting as a legal assistant, but you also, I believe in high school, were thinking of pre-med and moved into law. So why don't you take a couple minutes and tell us a little bit about what your trajectory has been, some of the building blocks that you faced.
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I truly was honored that you even wanted to hear anything from me, and thank you to everyone who's attending. We will also be recording this, so for anybody who doesn't want to be recorded, you may want to, turn off your camera or drop off, and you can watch it later. But for my career trajectory, I would say that I'm sort of the female equivalent of Peter Pan when it comes to my career of sort of never knowing what I want to be when I grow up, and maybe even never wanting to grow up. I started off in college. I was pre-med. I majored in biology because I was pre-med. Found out through actually a pretty decent college advisor that I didn't have to stick with biology. I could do something else and still be pre-med. So I switched to psychology, which I absolutely loved. But once I graduated, I had decided I was going to be an optometrist through a long and winding road of I wanted something interesting, but that didn't involve a surgeon's hours, where I could still have a family. And so I finally settled on this one area, and I worked a lot in that field and had some really great mentors along the way. And even started school for a quarter in optometry school, and then really just had a quarter life crisis of what did I just get myself into? This is so boring. Maybe I'll just do this for 5 years and then have some kids and stay home with the kids, which is probably not what you want to be doing with a $400,000 degree. And I felt like a fraud and a failure, and I'm in too far, I'm in too deep. And fortunately, I have amazing parents who are very supportive and told me you are never in too deep, never in too far. And an amazing, at the time, boyfriend who is now my husband, who gave me the same advice. So I left optometry school with my tail between my legs, went through, depression, anxiety, all of those things. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to shift. I've learned that in the meantime. But eventually settled on the law as my chosen career path, which I did with a lot of thought because I didn't want to make the same mistake twice. So I worked as a legal assistant, as you mentioned, for a couple of years before going to law school. And just to make sure I actually really liked it, and I did. I had the good fortune of working with a solo practitioner who really needed an associate, not a legal assistant, but I didn't have a law degree. So we sort of went right up to that line of where it would be practicing law without a license, and stayed on the correct side of it, but we went right up to it. And I got a lot of really good experience doing what I was authorized to do without a law degree. And so then from there, I just went to law school, did the normal stuff. Wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do with my degree, but knew I wanted to help people, as much of a cliche as that is. Knew I wanted to serve in some way to make people's lives better. I initially went to Kirkland and Ellis to do IP law, specifically patent litigation, in part because my science background allowed me to sit for the patent bar. And I found the work to be interesting. I liked that I wasn't wasting my background. My change of path actually still led to the same direction and was still relevant to that area. I went to Kirkland because I wanted the best training, and it was during the recession. I wanted a place that would hopefully not lay me off, which thankfully they did not. Um, and then from there, it just became trying different things and trying not to close any doors. So I eventually, the hours at Kirkland were crazy and it was a lot. And it, for me, was not sustainable. And I knew I wanted to have a family and I wasn't sure I could really balance those. A lot of women do it, and a lot of women do it really spectacularly. But I think I had the self-awareness to know I'm not one of them. That's not something that I could do and be happy with. So I was looking for a bit of a career reset and also looking for something that would leave me feeling more fulfilled than what I was doing. I think when I was in big law, a lot of the cases we were working on, it felt like we were playing with monopoly money, and we were just saving, 50 million here, 20 million there for a client where that amount was a rounding error to them. And it wasn't overall that important. And I wasn't sure what I was doing was really having much of an impact. And so I went to work for the federal courts where I felt like I was having more of a direct impact. And I did. And I felt so much more fulfilled on such a lower salary and realized, money's not everything. And my fulfillment with my day-to-day life is really important. It's the reason I leave my two boys at home. So I knew my next move needed to be something that would fulfill me, and ultimately decided on in-house, that I wanted to get really engaged with one company and one company's success and be working towards a common goal that I really believed in. And then that's where I went on the in-house route.
Well, you know what, a couple things. I love how you shared that you can change careers, right? That, you're not stuck in something if you make a decision once. The support of your husband and your parents and people, those around you. And then also it's a fearful change, right? So I think sometimes we think we're just going to skate through something, but there are ups and downs. And I like how you spoke of your self-awareness, that looking at yourself and how you made some of these decisions. So that's really important for me to hear. What career advice would you give to someone who's starting out right now, and think that they ultimately want to go in-house? I think that's a career goal for many, but I think there's a lot of, as you talked about, stepping stones to get there. What advice would you give to them as they start to plan for something that would likely be years away, but what they're doing now is going to pay off?
Yeah, it's something that I talk to younger attorneys who are just starting out a lot in mentoring sessions. And the first question I always ask, that they may not know the answer to yet, but that I encourage them to really think about first and foremost, is why? Why do you want to go in-house? Is it because it's the natural path after your law firm? Is it because you are a young woman who wants to start a family and you think that you need to go on that path to have easier hours to manage? Sometimes it's easier hours, sometimes it's not. There are all kinds of in-house positions, kind of run the gamut on that. Is it because there's a certain area of business that you're interested in? Is it for the title and the prestige, right? That's probably not the right reason to do it, because there's a real learning curve with being in-house, and it is very different from the private practice of law. And so you have to really think about what are the reasons that you want to be there, and is that actually going to be the right fit for you? And that's something that only you can know individually. And so I guess my first piece of advice would be to ask that question and talk to as many in-house people as you can about what their life is like, what their job is like, what they like about their job, what they don't like about their job, what the learning curve is like, to see if that resonates with you and is something that really fits. For me, it really fit because one of the things I liked the most about clerking was managing issues at sort of a 30,000 foot view in terms of legal cases and legal issues. I didn't need to be the one taking the deposition or arguing before the court, but I liked still having my hand in it, which meant that my work at Groupon was very much like that. I was managing outside counsel in our litigation and thinking through at a macro level, what that meant and drilling down where I needed to in terms of strategy. But I liked managing a docket of cases versus just kind of being assigned to one. And that was going to be my life for the next 3 years. And then as I've progressed, I really have enjoyed being involved with the business aspect more, which is then kind of what led to my current job. The other thing I would tell someone who's either just starting out or who is already, significantly through their career and looking at making potentially a change would be to really focus on your skill set development rather than try to check certain boxes of I need to clerk or I need to do this or I need to do that, I need to work in this type of space. Think more about what are the skills you need to develop if you want to be an in-house lawyer or for whatever it is you want to do. Maybe you want to be a prosecutor for the government or whatever your end goal is. What are the skill sets you really need to have? What do you already have in spades and what do you need to work on? And then search out projects and opportunities that help you with that skill set. And it may not be directly related to what you're doing currently, like a litigator who needs more contract experience. That's a hard thing to get. So maybe that litigator needs to focus more on drafting settlement agreements when they come up or retention agreements when somebody's hiring your firm. Those are contracts. Or you need to try to get involved in an M&A due diligence where your role on the team is evaluating the value of ongoing litigation for a target and your clients trying to decide whether they want to buy this target and do they want to buy all that liability. Maybe that's a way of you getting some M&A experience. So trying to think outside the box as to where you can develop those skill sets that might be lacking.
Okay. So you have been a mentor and you've been mentored for many years. What are the necessary ingredients that you have found for mentorship, and what are a few lessons that you've gleaned from your from your mentors?
Yeah, I think that mentorship is really a two-way street, and it should be. It often feels, I have more often than not been the mentee versus the mentor. The mentor aspect is, somewhat newer, other than I suppose I've mentored law students along the way, but the mentor side is still something that I feel less of than I feel a mentee. But as a mentee, we often feel like we're a sieve, that we're just taking and taking and taking. And there can be some guilt that comes along with that. Like, oh, why would this person want to meet with me? Why would this person want to, they're just giving and giving and giving. I'm just taking and taking and taking, like the giving tree, something like that. So what I would say is try to think about where you can add value. So one of my longtime mentors who has in over the years become one of my closest friends. I remember when we first started our mentorship relationship, I was, I think, a first year associate at Kirkland, and she was a managing partner of a major law firm, the head of the IP group at a major law firm. And so her daughter was pregnant for the first time, and I was pregnant for the first time. And so I ended up sharing with her my baby registry and like all this, like new like pregnancy advice and infant advice and all these different things. And even though it had zero to do with the law or our general discussions, it really helped her feel comfortable supporting her daughter becoming a mom for the first time and her becoming a grandmother. And so I didn't really think about it at the time until she told me later how helpful it was that was a way that I was helping make it more of a two-way street. So there's always something that a mentee can do to make the relationship valuable to the mentor, but it's not something you have to really to do right away. And it has to happen organically, but you should be looking for those opportunities because mentees often become a source of business later for the mentor or different, there are different components to it aside from just that direct relationship. But I think that having that shared exchange is really important. Plus just the ability to click with somebody. I think forced mentorship pairs can be challenging because you're not going to click with everyone. And if it's not working, just like any relationship, I think you have to learn when to dump it if it's just not quite going your way, or if a mentor is just not being responsive, or they just don't seem like they're really interested, or they're just doing it because the firm made them. You get that vibe pretty quickly, and so you kind of learn as you go through it where to invest your time. Same thing here. I've had mentees where I feel like I'm chasing them down constantly, and I'm like, what are we doing? It's okay. If they're not interested, then I'm not going to chase. So I think that's a huge part of it as well, is just having that mutual interest in it. And then you asked about things that I've learned from my mentors. I think the two biggest lessons have been, one, to follow your passion, which is a total cliche, and it just annoyed me to no end because I always felt like I don't know what my passion is. I have so many passions, or so many different things I'm interested in. So what I really got out of it was find your passion, right? Figure out what it is that drives you, figure out what your why is. And for me, that came very recently, only in the last couple of years. I read Angela Duckworth's Grit, and she has an exercise in the book that asks you to go through and just sort of free associate, I think it's jobs or areas that you have enjoyed in the past, enjoy currently, or think you would enjoy in the future, and just look at what the common thread to all that is. So for me, I loved being a law professor, which I did for a couple of years. So I loved teaching. I think I would love being a yoga instructor or a massage therapist. I think would be really fun. I loved being a law clerk. I love being a lawyer, candidly. And when I looked at all the different things that I had collected, the one thing that really stood out was service, serving others, helping others solve problems and making their lives better. And so that's my why. That's not obviously everybody's why, but that's my why. And so making sure that the steps that I take in my career are following that and authentic to that is really important to me, and something that I've seen each of my mentors do. They speak so passionately about what they do, and they're so happy in what they do, which in the law is unfortunately in short supply. The other biggest thing when I think of each of my kind of primary mentors is just kindness always. I mean, they each just lead with kindness and just radiate kindness. And they're the types of people who, when you walk into the room, there could be 50 people there, but they make you feel like you're the only one in the room. And so that's what I try to keep at the forefront and really try to emulate. I want other people to feel that way about me.
It's interesting because I think there's formal and informal mentorships. And I will share a story about where you've been a mentor to me. I'm going to get the time wrong, but I feel like it was about a year and a half ago, we had a ChiWIP in-house breakfast at Clipperbridge. And we all sat down, and you were probably in your position, I don't know, 6 months. And the position for general counsel came up. And I remember you sitting there thinking, why not me? Right. And I remember you thinking about this and, who you were working with, and you've now achieved that position. But I remember you asking that question and saying, why not me? And I could fit this role. So that was, in a mentoring way, that was a real inspiration for me as well. So I think, you're probably much more of a mentor than to a lot more women than you even know. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in terms of supporting women and diversity and inclusion. But just at a personal level, you have definitely been a mentor and a real support to the in-house group. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And actually, I can't take credit for it because I think it was another lady sitting with us at breakfast who asked me, well, why not you? And I was like,
oh, really?
But then, it started the wheels spinning. So yeah, but I appreciate it.
Right. It's really exciting. And I think that also speaks to the community of how we need, I always say, a posse of women to make these changes, and men. I'm not just saying it's for women, but I think it's really important that we have these communities or networks. And I'm sure you're going to talk more about that when all the associations that you're involved with that also either give us the ideas or push us forward to areas maybe that we weren't even thinking about. So I like that. You obviously, I mean, I always think work-life balance is very, very important. As a mom myself, I found that once I had children, I became the most efficient person on the planet because I had to, right? And I like that skill. But you have managing a career, many, many changes, a family, and really are very supportive and hands-on with Spencer and Xavier. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that work-life balance, your commitment, and how that probably, my guess is, in when you made choices for different, either not so much Kirkland, but different in-house positions, that you want to carve that out and make that an important part of your life. So in your discussions or who you work with, they also feel that that's important and they support it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was raised by a stay-at-home mom, and a really hands-on dad who adjusted his work schedule so that he would leave every day at about 5 a.m. and be able to come home by 3 so that he was home when we got home from school. So I was always used to having two really involved parents, and I wanted to emulate that. Although I knew pretty early on, and I have been reminded of it in many ways, not the least of which is this kind of quarantine world we're living in, that I'm not cut out for the stay-at-home mom life. I don't know how my mom did it. It is honestly the hardest job I think you can possibly have. And it is not something that I can do without quite literally losing my sanity. So for me, I've always known I wanted to work, but not that I wanted work to be my life. And so there has been a need in my own world to have that kind of balance, while also recognizing, Ruth Bader Ginsburg back here, who literally watches over my shoulder every day. She said essentially, you can have it all, just not all at once. So and I take that to mean that there are some days where work and your career really is your focus, and some days where your kids are 100% your focus, and most days are a mix of the two. And it's not 50-50. I mean, the term balance, right, always implies that we're somehow at this magical 50-50 level, and that just doesn't exist. There are months of 80-20 one way or the other, right? It's a constant fluctuation. For me, though, it's always been really important, in some ways, especially because I'm raising two boys, for them to see me doing really important things professionally. And we talk about those things a lot. We talk about them at the dinner table. We have a little tradition we just started a couple of months ago where we go around the dinner table and each of us four report on one kind thing we did that day and one thing that we're grateful for. And it's been awesome. I highly encourage people to do this exercise because actually it's made my marriage stronger, because frequently the grateful thing is we're like grateful for something the other spouse did. It's been great for the kids to see the kind things that we do during the day, for us to see what they do when we're not around. But a lot of times I'll be reporting on, something that I did at work or something I did, for an organization. Tonight my thing might be coming to speak with all of you, although that's probably going to be my grateful thing, not my kind thing. So it's something where it gives our boys a bird's eye view into what we do every day. And I think that's really important because that helps to cut against this notion of, dad works and makes the money, mom stays at home, which is fine if that is the setup that works for a particular family. I mean, it's certainly the setup that I was raised in, but it shouldn't be the default that you just assume that that's automatically what's appropriate. So for me, that's been really important to convey to my boys. And the only reason I've been able to do it or have any kind of balance is that I have an incredibly supportive and egalitarian spouse. So my husband is an absolute feminist, even though I'm not sure he's fully comfortable with that title yet. He is completely hands-on. We share the duties, 50-50, sometimes 70-30 with him taking 70 and me taking 30, right? Sometimes I take 70, he takes 30. But it's day to day. I have an 8:30 call. Can you handle, right? It's those things. We juggle it. And we have amazing, excellent childcare. We have a nanny. And, I say that understanding that we're very privileged to have the resources to be able to have that excellent childcare. And we could have a whole conversation on how and why that should be available to every family in the United States. But obviously, there's a lot of work to do in that area. But I've seen firsthand how critical it is to have amazing, reliable childcare who, in our particular nanny, she's just become an extension of our family, and really fills so many gaps for us, and is just sort of a surrogate grandmother to our kids, a surrogate mom to me sometimes. I mean, it's that kind of it takes a village mentality is really 100% true. And she is certainly a huge part of our village, along with our school system and other providers as well. And that's really what allows me and my husband the flexibility to be able to maintain our careers at a high level without feeling that we are really sacrificing on the kid front. Our kids are extremely well taken care of. And then it also affords us the ability that when we are with them, it's quality time. We're not just catching up on all the stuff in the house. We're actually able to spend real time with them.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm going to take a break here, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but this is meant to be interactive. So we have an amazing group of women who are joining this call, and I welcome your questions. I welcome you to ask questions through the chat feature. And so I don't want to monopolize the whole conversation because I have several questions. So feel free to send a question through the chat or even interrupt for a second. Okay, and now I was going to talk a little bit about.
I do have a question, Molly.
Oh, go for it. Yeah. Please, but right in, lovely. I love that you do that.
So one of the things that you mentioned, Lauren, about getting exposure to these different areas, to not necessarily like digging deep into them, but really to like broaden your ability to become a GC one day. And you brought up, say, for example, if you need contract experience, like start negotiating like a settlement agreement or something like that. How do you recommend that people who are, not super green anymore, but, who have, 5 or 6 years under their belt, approach that if in a workplace that really focuses on division of duties? So what I mean by that is, in terms of, take for example, like securities experience, like there's, a tone at the top saying, this should be handled by only this attorney, and we're really trying to be efficient, but yet there is an opportunity there for someone more junior to kind of follow along. So do you have any recommendations or advice on how to approach that in a way that's respectful, obviously, of the tone at the top, but also just making sure that you're looking out for yourself, in your kind of career trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously you don't want to signal, hey, I might be looking to leave, right? It's there's a line there you have to toe carefully. So I always think it's a good idea just to ask, but the question is how and to whom. So if you have a mentor or a friend in the office who you think you can kind of talk through, like, how should I approach this? That can be a really good first place to start, just because that individual will know kind of the dynamics of what's going on internal to the organization. But in general, I think the best approach is to think about it from the standpoint of how can I pitch this as something that benefits the company or benefits the individual attorney who I'm wanting to work with. So it's not necessarily that, a litigator is automatically going to get an opportunity to work on a securities thing, like right away. But maybe you find, on Law 360 or something like that, maybe you see some securities litigation around kind of an interesting issue, and you just forward it to that attorney and say, hey, I'm sure you've got this covered, but just so you know, like, this case came out, and just wanted you to be aware in case there's anything we need to do, to sort of protect ourselves in this area, or just try, those types of things, try to figure out maybe where you can add value and just start to be top of mind. And if you have a way that what you are doing can or does overlap with the area that you want to get more experience in, just offer your assistance and say, hey, I've been doing some work in this area. If you ever need anything with respect to, X, Y, or Z, please don't hesitate to let me know. I'd be happy to jump in. I had that at Groupon. Part of how I got some contracts experience early on was that several of my work friends were working in the contract space, and they were just kind of chatting like over lunch one day about some changes. And I was like, ooh, might want to be careful about that, because I've litigated that issue and it can get kind of gnarly, and here's how. And so then they started bringing me contract provisions before, like during negotiations, on like the limits for IP indemnity or those types of things, where I was like, oh yeah, no, here's what we need to make sure we have. And then it started this line of communication where we actually, as litigators in the litigation side at Groupon, started advising on changes to the contract. Like we actually audited the contract and said, hey, like we need this, we need this, we need this to protect ourselves. And it became a really collaborative approach. So looking for those types of value adds, it has to happen a little organically, but you also have to have your eyes open to it. So, it's not like you decide you want to do it on Monday and it happens on Tuesday, but the more you look for it, the more that you'll start to find it.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
Anyone else have a question that they want to ask Lauren?
Hey, Lauren, this is Carol. I had a question about being like more of a people manager. Sometimes I feel like I suffer from imposter syndrome, and I'm like, I'm good in my current role. I like the work I do, and being scared to like jump to that next level where you're responsible for a lot of people and having a lot of people report to you. So I was curious on your thoughts on, how your evolution going from Groupon to now being GC in your current company, if that causes like a lot more stress, or if you kind of just welcome that opportunity to become more of a people manager.
I love people management.
Of course
mostly
you do.
mostly because I love people. I mean, it's just part of just kind of who I am at my core. I joke that it's not a joke, it's true. The thing I miss most lately about, this whole quarantine life is networking with random strangers. I miss standing around a cocktail table with awful hors d'oeuvres and a terrible Chardonnay and just meeting new people. Because I love people and I crave that. And the only people I see in person these days pretty much are the one I married and the two that I created. So kind of getting a little stir crazy. But back to your question. Yes, I really enjoy people. I enjoy mentoring, and a lot of management is mentorship as opposed to just managing on the specific legal topics or the workload or the work stream. It's actually mentorship, advice, professional development, professional growth, those types of issues, which I'm really passionate about and I just enjoy. I will say people management, though, is new to me. So I was not a people manager until I stepped into my role. Actually, one of my former bosses is on the call, Ms. Catherine Minerick. I worked for her at Cleverbridge at first. She's the one that hired me there. And I learned a lot about people management from her, because Catherine really has what I would say is just a very authentic, open, kind of laid back view in terms of she's going to give you enough rope, but not enough to hang yourself with. She's going to make sure you're always protected. And she'll be very forthcoming about advice, about how she's handled, interpersonal situations in the past or specific legal issues, whatever it is. Just she's always been somebody who's really forthcoming with just knowledge sharing in general. And so that's how I try to approach it with my direct reports. I had another manager right before I came to work at Cleverbridge. My manager at at Groupon, who on the LinkedIn announcement for this thing playfully suggested he might come and troll me during this, but it appears he did not make good on that. But he's amazing. He's an amazing boss. And one of his real gifts is he could provide developmental feedback, so constructive criticism essentially, in a way where you felt like you were in it together. You felt like he thinks you're awesome and here's how you're going to be even more awesome. And you left the conversation feeling good, which says a lot because I don't like criticism. I don't think any of us type A people do. But he really had a magical way of doing that, because I think one of the disservices that we can do as managers is when we don't give that kind of feedback and we don't let people know kind of, here's how we might want to approach this in the future. Here's here's a skill set where you need to develop. Here's the skill set you're doing really well on. Here's where we need some development. And so I try to be mindful about spotting those issues within my own team, and being compassionate in how I deliver it, because I don't want anybody to feel deflated, but kind of balancing that with the mentorship aspect that is a part of mentorship is helping people to develop. And you might feel an imposter syndrome about you're supposed to have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. We talk it through, we figure it out. Most of the legal issues we see are new to me, half the time. So, and new to both of us. And so I'll give some direction as to where I think we might be able to find the answer and how to approach it. Because those are things I can do. Those are things I've spent, years and years doing, is figuring out the answer to hard questions. But it doesn't mean that you're going to know everything. And I think in some ways it makes it a better relationship because it is more collaborative. I tell my direct reports when they start. I've had a couple of new hires recently, and I tell them in the interview process, this is not a partner associate relationship, right? Like, I am not your boss. I am your boss in terms of I'm going to protect you. I'm going to make sure you get what you need. I'm going to make sure that our department is taken care of. But aside from that, this is collaborative. I'm not going to review your work unless you want me to, and I'm always happy to provide input. But I want people to feel taken care of and yet empowered. And I've been very lucky to have bosses in the past, Catherine included, who have made me feel that way. And so that's really what I try to do, is to be the leader that I have always wanted and have always respected, and to be the ones that I've always enjoyed the most, and then learn from the duds I've had along the way as well, the others, of what not to do.
Thanks.
Any other questions? And do bring them up as we finish this interview. Part of the reason that we set up this fireside chat today was kind of in recognition of International Women's Day, which is a global day celebrating social, economic, cultural achievements for women. This day also marks a call to action for accelerating gender parity. How has your call to action influenced your career, volunteering, mentoring, etc.? And then on the kind of side note to that, which I think is really exciting, if you could share a little bit about Clever Bridge's acknowledgement of this day for all of your employees and what that means to you and to the other women who you work with and men.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that commitment to gender parity really has influenced my desire to mentor. I mean, I've had a lot of really amazing mentors in my own life, male and female. And the women mentors, the best ones, have been the ones that were just such an open book about what life has been like and their career has been like for them. The struggles that they've faced, the times it went really well, the times it went really not so well, the learnings along the way, and have always, I have felt, been really invested in me and really wanted to see my success, as opposed to sometimes we encounter women along the way who have more of the, well, I had to go through that hard struggle, you're going to have to too, which I think is less prevalent now. I hope it is. It seems to be. But I think there was a time when you did see that, you know, some of the real trailblazers who had it really, really hard as we think we have it, who haven't maybe been as supportive to the future generations. And I don't ever want to be that. We should be throwing down the rope and pulling up others, which means mentoring, which means being upfront about things like finances. You know, I'll talk about the gauche topics with people if it helps them get some transparency, especially like I'll have especially women come to me who are evaluating in-house offers and trying to decide, am I getting lowballed? I'll talk about it with them because, you know, I have some experience in that area. And I think it helps to have some benchmarking because, you know, we know the pay gap is there. How are we going to actually overcome the pay gap? I think by talking about it, you know, by taking these numbers out from behind the curtain, right? Pull the curtain back on Oz a bit. And I also make sure just in my work life that I'm very vocal about celebrating all employees' accomplishments, but I will especially look for women to say, wow, she did this awesome thing. It's really great. Even if it's just sort of an aside in a conversation, you know, with our CEO or with our CFO, just something, you know, oh yeah, so and so, oh yeah, she's great. She just did this thing recently. Just to help people who normally maybe because of their role within the company don't have as much visibility at some of those levels, to try to, you know, make sure that the people in charge know what a great job that they're doing.
So tell us a little bit about Clever Bridge and how they're acknowledging this day, which I think is wonderful. And you shared what it means to other women, but I'm thrilled that Clever Bridge is acknowledging this. Do you think other companies are going to start to do the same?
Wow. Cleverbridge is the first company I've worked for that acknowledged it, and really the first time I was very aware of this day existing. And so we will be closing our office on Monday in honor of the day, which it started before I joined, so I can take absolutely no credit for that. But I believe Catherine was involved in that, and our CEO definitely. So I really appreciate that I work at a company that finds it important enough to take that step when many companies are not. And then this year in particular, our Clever Women, as we call it, our Clever Women group has become more active again. When I started at the company, I asked somebody, do we have a women's group? And they're like, yeah, we do. It kind of went defunct. We haven't really done anything for a while. And I was like, oh, well, that will not do. So we got back together and we got it going. And we've had some amazing women join the company recently who have additionally picked up the reins to it, and it's running full steam ahead. And so this year we actually got budget internally to have a keynote speaker come, and we'll have a keynote address on this Friday in honor of International Women's Day for all of our employees. And so, you know, that's another, and we're looking to make that an annual thing. So that's another step forward as we offer more and more programming within the company geared towards challenging bias, and geared towards our women employees sharing stories, which we've done in some other events about, you know, things we've experienced on the professional level and how we can challenge bias. So there's a real culture of inclusion at Cleverbridge that just makes it such a unique place.
Well, and like you said, and I didn't even realize this. So the first acknowledgement of International Women's Day was in 1911. Okay, that shocked me, right? And I've read some recent books about kind of this evolution, and I wonder to this day how my mother navigated, and she was a very strong woman, so I applaud her. Do you think that we're on track for women's equality? Do you suggest we practice we practice some of these supports in our law firms and corporations, and what would that look like?
Oi, oi, are we on track? We are on a track. Not sure if we're on the track. It's getting better. I think, again, I'm going to go back to, the rock star RBG. She has another quote that I'm going to mangle a bit probably. It says, women, we will have achieved true equality when the genders take equal share in raising the next generation. Something like that. Basically, once you get parity in the home and childcare does not explicitly fall to women, you will get true equality in the workplace, because you will no longer have, hopefully, the pay. I mean, it doesn't solve everything, but you will go a long way towards eliminating or closing the pay gap and towards the bias that women somehow don't work as hard or aren't going to stay in the workforce as long because they're going to have kids, or they have kids, or they're going to stay home with the kids, or they're supposed to stay home with the kids, or all of that. So we really need to do a lot of work in that area, some of which is going to come from corporations and our own internally, how we handle family commitments and work-life balance issues and all of those things. And some of it may come from the government in terms of improved leave, childcare, those types of things as well. It's less, I think we're finding, it is less a women's issue and more a family issue, right? That spans both of the genders. And until we really, oh, here comes the little one, until we really formalize that, we're not really going to make the progress that we need. Hi, baby. You want to come over and say hi to some women? What'd you I can't go. Come here. You made some art.
Oh,
It is sticky. It's the favorite part of my day. This is work-life balance, right? It's his favorite part of my day. He comes and shows me his artwork every day when he gets home from preschool. All right, buddy. Thank you so much. You get to do 2 artworks. That's awesome. Right.
I love it.
Oh. All right, I'll come down in a little bit and talk to you about it. Thanks, baby. So that. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Oh, I'm so glad he joined us. I'm so glad he joined us. He's grown so much. I haven't seen him in probably over a year.
I forgot to lock my door, but also our door lock no longer really works because the boys have figured out how to fiddle with it so they can get in while we're working. So anyway, do I think we're on the right track? Long story short, I mean, I think we're getting there. I do think we have a lot of work to do. And the other RBG quote, I just feel like that's all I'm doing lately, is, her "when there are 9" quote, right? She gets asked about when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court, and her answer is when there are 9. And then people sort of ask, are you joking? Are you serious? And she's like, well, yes. I mean, why shouldn't it be? It was 9 men for so long and nobody questioned it, right? So why do we hear something like that and say, oh, that's just silliness, right? Like, when are we going to get to the point where an all-female executive board is not out of the question? When are we going to get to the point where a majority female-owned law firm is not the exception, right? Like, when are we going to get to that point? That's when we will have really, I think, reached the goal, and we are getting better, but we're not close.
We still have work to do, something to aspire to. So we're coming up on the hour, and I want to again give anyone the opportunity to ask any question of Lauren. And I'm sure she would talk to you afterwards. My last question is talking about networking. So you've been involved in many associations, and including ChiWIP, and you've met women and men throughout, but what has been the value of networking, being involved in different associations, and maybe what are a few of the practices that you use when you go to an event? So for example, I go to an event and I say to myself, if it's a whole evening, I have to have so many conversations or so many business cards before I can leave the event if I'm exhausted or something like that. Like I try to put some practices in place, or I try to look at an event and say, okay, what can I do to give back to someone tonight? What are some either associations that you've been involved in, some practices that you've utilized, and why do you see networking as so valuable in your career?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And actually, you're the one probably should be answering it because you are a star when it comes to networking. I've always admired your ability to work a room. And I mean, it's interesting that you have a plan of attack when you go in, because I don't, and I probably should. But I like that. I like the way that you have goal setting connected to it. For me, I guess that the few things, one, again, I like people. I like doing this. It's also for a long time pre-COVID, it's kind of was my social life, right? Like a way to get out of the house and have some adult time without needing a babysitter or having our nanny stay late, because my husband, if it's my networking thing, my husband stays home, or gets home early for the kids. If it's his networking thing, I do it. And so it's just kind of a nice way to have something that's just yours. Networking in my role now in-house means something different than what it did in private practice and then what it did working for the government. So, private practice, it's much more about, in theory, business generation. I mean, I was young. I was only a fifth year associate when I left. So business generation wasn't really, firmly on my radar or in my grasp. At the government, networking was just fun. I mean, there wasn't really any reason I had to. I just enjoyed it, but also looking at what am I going to be doing after the clerkship, because the clerkship's a set time frame that ends. Now, what it's about, for me, honestly, first and foremost, what I enjoy most about it is talking to other professional parents, not just women, men as well, especially because men these days that I tend to interact with are far more involved with their kids than maybe my parents' generation, certainly the generation before that. So just kind of bonding with other parents about this shared experience of being in the trenches of kids, career, trying to actually see your spouse if you have a spouse once in a while, like all of these things. I feel that it's helpful to connect with other individuals on those issues because it makes you feel less alone. And I also really appreciate just connecting with other women in general, kids, no kids, whatever, because I feel like we can talk about issues that are unique to us. I'm a very open book, obviously. And so I like helping other women to know, yes, that happens to me too. That drives me nuts too. And just helping other women to feel seen and knowing that I'm seen, knowing that I'm not the only one, questioning that, feeling this way, hearing that tone of voice. That's one of the benefits, I think, of networking is just connect. So I had a mentor years and years ago who's long since passed away. But he always said, you're not networking, you're connecting. And I think that that's absolutely right. I look at it as just an opportunity to connect with other individuals. And then there's plenty of things that come out of it. Certainly I've had jobs come out of it. I've hired lawyers coming out of networking in terms of, hired their services. I've had immeasurable benefits that have come from it, both business and personal wise. But the way that I look at it is connection first, and then whatever the result is going to be is going to come after.
Wonderful. Well, I want to say thank you so much for our first fireside chat. And I love that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is over your shoulder because she's a huge inspiration to me as well. But you have been such an inspiration today. You've given me even a bigger snapshot into your life, into what you value, not only in work, but in your whole life. And that's been just a real motivation for me. And I'm very excited for when we can all be in person again. And I just want to say thank you. You really are a rock star and you really have offered such great advice today. And, best practices of where you are. And, I'm excited. I'll be really excited to see where you are in 5 years and have this interview again.
Sounds good. Hopefully I'm still at Cleverbridge and they'll still take me. Because it's a
I'm
great
sure they
place to
will.
be.
Yeah.
Thank
And we're
you
getting
so much.
tons and tons of thank yous. So just so you know, it's coming your way.
Well, thank you. Anybody who I don't know who is on the meeting, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or otherwise. I'm always happy to connect. Again, this was recorded and it's very similar to the conversations I have with like a first mentorship discussion with people. So if you know people who might find this of value, please feel free to forward it to them. And it'll also help me to have fewer first mentorship conversations. So that's a good thing, and get into the meat faster, which I'm always happy to do. So don't be shy. I'm here. At a minimum, I'm always happy to take a little break in my day to connect with somebody interesting.
Thank you. Thanks again. And thanks for everybody who's joining. Really appreciate your comment here and for joining us, and keep an eye out for future Fireside Chats. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, everyone.